Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much for being with us today, both in person and virtually. We are going to have our webinar with this distinguished speaker. And once more and again, is our pleasure to give all of you our contribution in terms of elements of new thinking and new vision through our speakers today. And I don't want to take more time, and I leave to Ed introduce you all the speakers, and I want to thank the speakers, of course, to have accepted to be with us today. As well, I thank you in person and those that are following us virtually. Thank you very much. Enjoy the webinars. Ed.
Grazie mille, Gaetano. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from. It's such a pleasure to be back here in Vicenza again for VicenzaOro. Thank you so much to Italian Exhibition Group, IEG, organizers of this show, and especially thank you to Marco Carniello and all of the team for welcoming us back into the Italian jewelry family. It's such a pleasure to be back because Jewellery Industry Voices, the webinar series that we've been running from CIBJO for almost exactly 2 years now, we've run that virtually. It's been on Zoom once a month. And I can't tell you how enjoyable it is to be back in real life, IRL, as they say, talking to you in front of a live audience and with all of my panelists here today. So thank you, everybody, for joining. So as I say, this event forms part of our webinar series, Jewellery Industry Voices, and we look at issues of interest that are affecting the global jewelry industry. And we do that from the perspective of industry figures. For the first of 2 conversations that we're having today, I'm joined by leaders from the platinum, gold, colored gemstones, pearls, and diamond industries. And the focus is that we're here to highlight the benefits that these products and businesses bring to communities all around the world where they're farmed, mined, sourced, and manufactured. And why it's important for consumer confidence, and it's important to continue to build on the current strong demand that the jewelry industry experienced last year, and to build on this and follow industry standards in responsible sourcing, in responsible business practice, and also in the wider picture of sustainability. We know that society and consumers are changing rapidly. And this is due to the cultural shifts that were happening long before the pandemic. But they've been accelerated. We've seen that many luxury brands now are really focusing and highlighting on the positive impacts and benefits that they and their supply chains bring to society. They're clearly demonstrating these benefits. This is additional to the focus that they've always done on luxury, quality, service, and experience. It's now an integral part of a jeweler's weaponry that they can use to sell jewelry at the retail counter. So we're here to talk about that today. It's important to build from the basis that the industry has already been working on for almost 20 years now around sustainability and responsible sourcing standards. I am very, very pleased to be joined on stage today by 5 leaders, as I said, from the 5 component parts that make up fine and luxury jewelry. Starting on my left here, Hugh Daniel, a veteran of the jewelry industry and the advertising industry, if I can say, joining us as the Chief Executive of the Platinum Guild International, PGI. Hugh, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Also, Charlie Betts from the Betts Metal Group, based in Birmingham in UK. Charlie's business is over 260 years old. He doesn't look it, I know, but the business has been around for a long time, one of the oldest businesses in the UK jewelry manufacturing business. Thank you so much for joining us today, Charlie.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
Hayley Henning from Greenland Ruby. Always a pleasure to have Hayley with us, representing the coloured stone sector. Thanks for travelling to be with us today, Hayley.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All the way from Fiji, his first time out of the country for 2 years. We are so pleased to have enticed Justin Hunter from J. Hunter Pearls in Fiji onto stage with us, representing the Pearl community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Closer afield, we have Chris Bull from Dimexon, having travelled from Antwerp. Chris is really a leader, and Dimexon is a leader in sustainability and the diamonds impact story that have been working for many years now. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ed. Nice to be here.
Let's dive straight into some questions that I have here for the panelists. Now, from my perspective, and Charlie, if I can turn to you first, gold is the first component that we think of when we're building up a piece of jewelry. But, I mean, I think we've seen that many people have turned towards sustainability, especially recently, and are starting to use the term. Arguably, the term is being so overused, it's becoming somewhat meaningless. Given that mining is inherently not environmentally sustainable, given that once we take it out of the ground, we're not going to put it back in there, what should sustainability look like within the jewelry industry from your perspective?
Thanks, Ed. It's a big question, so I'll try and just give a very quick summary to begin with. As you say, brands across all industries are increasingly using the word sustainability in their marketing and branding, and that's a good thing because it means they're doing that for a reason. They're doing that because consumers are taking an interest in sustainability, and it's starting to cut through to consumer demand. The flip side of that is it means that brands are not for long going to be able to get away with just talking about it. They're actually going to have to really understand it and engage with what they're doing. And I think from a jewelry industry perspective, the best way a brand can look at and consider its sustainability is to engage with its supply chain. Like you say, mining is almost by definition not sustainable. You're digging a big pit. Once it's gone, it's gone. But what is sustainable is the beneficial impact that mining can have, particularly from a social, but actually also from an environmental perspective, if it's done properly. So the jewelry industry needs to drive that change within the mining industry.
And where I want to talk later on with you, of course, I introduced you as being from Betts Metals, but you're representing a new project that you're launching through your company Hummingbird Resources called SMO, Single Mine Origin Gold, where the gold is fully traceable back to a mine, Yanfolila mine in Mali, in West Africa. So we're looking forward to that conversation specifically about the positive impact that your product brings to society. But if I can turn next for the platinum perspective to you, Hugh. Again, the mineral is brought out of the ground. The largest miners are involved in the PGI. Do you feel nowadays, even with this shift, that consumers are aware of responsible or sustainable jewelry, and what is the importance of it in jewelry purchasing decisions?
Well, PGI, as you know, we basically handle the consumer marketing of platinum in the jewelry space. So this is an issue that we track very closely in all of the markets. As a consumer issue, the US is obviously leading. There we see something like 70% of consumers stating a concern in sustainability. But what's interesting is we've also seen that now developing in the other markets, notably in India, Japan and China. So among the younger generation of consumer, this is definitely something that they're saying they're concerned about. And generally that is impact on environment, traceability to source, and importantly, especially in the US, impact on human lives. It's the human aspect in particular that seems to capture the imagination of the American consumer. When it comes to actually purchasing behavior, of course, you know, we can say one thing, but when it comes to actually what we spend our money on, it's a slightly different thing. But what we've seen is consumers generally are willing or expressed a willingness to pay a premium for a product that can be certified as sustainably sourced. So, for example, in the US, that premium consumers claim to be 10 to 15%. In India, it's more, in the US, it's more 15 to 20%. In India, we're seeing 10, 15%. So, but I think that's something that will change over time.
That premium is important to note because, of course, you know, the more consumers are not challenged by a price point, the more they're going to buy. But we are operating here in a luxury environment. And Justin, if I can bring you in with pearls, where do you see pearls within the sustainable luxury sphere?
Thank you, Ed. I think first we've got to understand that pearls are something that are farmed, that they come from some of the most beautiful and remote island and coastal communities in the world, which are pristine by nature, because you know, pearl farming requires a pristine marine environment in order for you to produce good pearls. Therefore, you know, when you look at the social, economic, and environmental benefits that pearls bring to these developing island countries and communities, it's significant, and it's something that luxury should get behind and understand that a strong pearl industry really does benefit a lot of people, and we would love to see it, that aspect understood, you know, especially in a time when we understand that biodiversity is quite crucial in terms of battling climate change, as tropical species are going to be proliferate throughout the oceans in the future, and in this regard, pearl farms act as quasi-marine protected areas.
Thank you for that, you know, that point, and we'll dive into that in more detail in a minute. So moving along from the pearls, let's go to coloured stones. Let's go up to the frozen wastes of Greenland. And, you know, Hayley, you've been such a champion of sustainability and corporate responsibility for so many years with a number of companies. But in your journey, your sustainability journey and your business journey, where do you see the industry doing well, and where can it improve?
Thank you for the question, Ed. And as you rightly said, I have been involved in sustainability, aspects of sustainability in the coloured gemstone industry for quite some time. And actually, within our industry, it is coloured stones that does offer a great challenge because, as most of you probably know, the coloured gemstone industry is, you know, most coloured gemstones are sourced from countries, exotic origins that are, you know, very, very difficult to pin aspects of sustainability or even responsibility on some of these origins. So it has been a focus for me over the years, you know, making it a priority in everything that I've done, you know, from one-on-one to, you know, big corporate aspects. What do we do well? Events such as this, attending, talking about it, talking about sustainability within our industry, organizations like CIBJO, for example, who have worked very, very hard on their Blue Book information that's available to everybody in our industry, gathering information amongst one another, stakeholders within our industries, and making that available not only for one another, but what I do think we can do better as an industry is involving the consumer more in what we do, because it is, in the end, the consumer that we're appealing to. And while we all know what each other does, how much of that actually filters through to consumer level. And it really is the consumer, as we know from our research, that is requiring more and more responsibility or sustainability from us as an industry. And we need to talk about it more on those sort of levels, telling them exactly what we do and how what we do actually makes a difference within communities, not only the communities in which we operate, but more widespread than just our very small communities in which we operate, and the industry as a whole.
Yeah, thank you, of course, for bringing the consumer in, because without the old adage that without the consumer, none of us would have any role and we wouldn't be sitting up here.
Right.
It's that last 18 inches across the counter that really counts, and those stories at the counter that you guys are part of at the start, at the start of the sourcing, is what really matters. And we saw that, Chris, with diamonds, where the diamond industry really was brought into the world of responsible sourcing, over 20 years ago, with the Kimberley process, which was established in 2003. And you've been involved in the diamond business for a number of years, many years with different companies, and have been through that journey, which, let's face it, it's made significant strides. But what does the diamond industry need to do to continue that forward motion of improvements?
Firstly, I think you're right. I think the diamond industry has made some strong strides over the last year. But to keep the momentum going, I think what we really need to do is focus on transparency throughout the supply chain. Now, I'm speaking from the midstream position, but we need to encourage our clients to ask us questions, and we need to be ready to give them answers. Because you mentioned the consumer, and the consumer is the one with the power. And, when they choose a brand to make a jewelry purchase with, of course, they're interested in the design and the price and maybe the quality of the stone, but there's a lot more questions that they want answers to. Perhaps, where did the diamond come from? Was it responsibly sourced? Was it polished in an environment that respected the human rights? Is the brand that they've chosen, do they reflect their values? Are they doing their bit for the climate? And are all the sustainability claims that the brand is making, can they stand up under scrutiny? So we are integral parts of their supply chain, and nowadays I feel we're not selling diamonds as such. We're selling diamonds, but a whole load of solutions around those stones. So are they 100% natural? What processes are we using to ensure that? Are we offering traceability and provenance solutions? Are we providing an environment where workers are well remunerated and working in healthy, safe conditions? Are our businesses ethically managed? So we have to encourage our clients to ask these questions, because without the answers, they can't complete the story, right? They have to give that reassurance to the end consumer who wants to know they're doing the right thing by buying from that particular brand.
And you mentioned that the consumer wants to buy from a brand that reflects their values.
Absolutely. I mean, we talk about the consumer voting with his wallet, and they want to feel that the brand that they've selected shares their values.
And when most of the consumers of jewelry are women, having strong ESG strategies, environmental, social, and governance strategies that promote gender equality are truly important for the brands to be able to reflect those strategies. Now, I know Dimexon have done a lot of work on that. You'd set KPIs for yourselves, and you've matched and met those KPIs. So tell us more about that journey that Dimexon's taken in gender equality.
I mean, that journey began actually a long time back, around 30 years ago, when the founder of the company, Pankaj Mehta, he was faced in the 90s with needing a significantly larger manufacturing facility. And as opposed to him going to Surat, where 90% of the diamonds were being polished at that time, he selected the town where he grew up, which is way down in the south of India, called Coimbatore. And at that time, he was looking around. He wanted to obviously to employ local people from the local community, and he came to the obvious realization that women had the attention to detail and the precision to polish diamonds as well as men. So, and at the same time, he could actually offer families that had, there were very few. I mean, Coimbatore was an industrial center, famous for its engineering, and there were very few employment opportunities for women at that time. So he made a decision to employ women. I think a few years later, 90% of the 3,500 workers that were there were women.
Wow. Yeah.
So this was something that began a long time back, and I think over the years, allowing flexibility, equal pay, gender equality, a lot of these young ladies moved up through there was no glass ceiling for them, so they moved up through the company, and today I think globally 75% of the company is female, and a third of those are in managerial positions. When I look at Antwerp, for example, my right-hand man is a woman, and my left-hand man is another woman. So, yeah, it's very much part of what we do.
It's such a great story to talk about, and it gives the retailers much more to talk about at the sales counter, and that's the point that we're always trying to make, is these stories make an impact.
Yeah.
And when we're moving forward into really getting into some positive impact stories, Hayley, for the coloured stones with you've started from Greenland Ruby, the Polar Bear Foundation. Now, with that foundation and the work that you do, how do you quantify the positive impacts that your operations make?
Well, at Greenland Ruby, we initiated the Pink Polar Bear Foundation, which is really our corporate social responsibility arm. It's an organization that is being driven by and funded by every gemstone that we sell at Greenland Ruby. So every stone that we sell contributes towards the Pink Polar Bear Foundation. And this is a foundation that is not about polar bears. It is about people, and it's about people in Greenland. And it's about contributing or supporting or being present on the ground in Greenland in a way other than just our gemstone production. So, for example, and this is a newly formed organization, just a couple of years old, so in its infancy, but to date we've sponsored 2 PhD students. We're focused on education, of course, 2 PhD students, and a sewing workshop in the south of Greenland, close to where our mining operation is. So through the Pink Polar Bear Foundation, our goal is to create awareness on the ground in Greenland for what we do with our gemstones. Of course, we are operating in Greenland, we're mining, and our gemstones find their way into an international marketplace. And what are we doing on the ground locally to support communities? And it's through the Pink Polar Bear Foundation that we're doing this. That's visually, that has a visual effect every single day. So, of course, we have other effects as well. Through our license with the Government of Greenland, our impact benefit agreement, of course, is key, and that's more on the environmental front. But the Pink Polar Bear Foundation is certainly all about people and the impact that we as gemstone producers are making locally.
And thinking about people, of course, sometimes mines get accused of bringing in too many outside labor. So
Right.
What sort of percentage of your workforce in Greenland are Greenlandic?
100% of our Greenlandic workforce are local Greenlandic people.
Oh.
And we're a very small company, actually, in terms of numbers, and we operate globally with offices in Norway and in Denmark, and of course in the US and in Europe. And of course Bangkok, which is where we do all of our processing in Thailand. But we are a small number of people, but 100% of local Greenlandic people in our Greenland operation.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And when we're thinking about diversity, I can't think of 2 countries that are more diverse than Greenland and Fiji. So let's just segue into Fiji. What are the main social and environmental issues that you can make a positive impact, Justin?
Well, when you look at a pearling industry, and if it's done correctly, when you have responsible pearl producers, you can do something quite unique, which is under the definition of a blue economy, whereby you actually merge economic opportunities for the people, our farmers, and the many people who rely on our farms, and conservation. When you can merge these two things, it's quite amazing, because pearl farms inherently need a clean environment around us, and our people therefore become stewards of the sea. They want to protect that environment. In Fiji 2 years ago, there was a cabinet paper approval for us to develop the small town of Savu, where I'm from, and I was then also appointed as a special administrator of mayor to try to implement what would be the world's first blue town. And so a blue town, by definition, is an area where we attract financing to some of the least developed properties in the world, so we can fix some of our basic infrastructure issues, such as waste recycling, lack of sewerage facilities, creating sustainable livelihoods through sustainable tourism, and also through pearls. And if you can do that, then it becomes a circular economy, and that's the best way we, as a developing island nation, can preserve this very valuable tropical marine biodiversity. It's by providing economic opportunities and creating this mechanism to transfer technology that we do not have from developed countries to these developing island nations. And the fact that I think pearls and our pearl industry, with the help of CIBJO and also the Australian and Philippine pearl producers, highlighted this, that just by definition, we create these buffers of conservation and in marine protected areas around our farms. And we do it because we need to protect our jobs and industry, but it works perfectly, and that's the definition of what is often referred to as the blue economy.
Yeah.
And so we're quite proud of that. And we believe that the pearl industry the world over, responsible oceanic pearls, should be able to follow a similar path, but it's upon us to make sure that we take up these social, economic, and environmental responsibilities as producers also to continue this.
And we know that one of the best ways to deal with the climate crisis now is to reduce poverty globally and bringing people opportunities that are sustainable and long-term for their economic progress. And
if I could just add to that, a lot of the developing island nations and communities that are involved in pearl production are also inherently merged and reliant on tourism. Yeah. And over the last 2 years, we've noticed that the impact of tourism and the loss of jobs, and even on pearl farms, although we can't quite stop, put a lot more stressors on resources. A lot more of the people who lost jobs in order to feed families, in order to put food on the table, send kids to school, even though that wasn't, they ended up going into these areas and putting a lot more pressure on these marine reserves, which it's in our long-term interest as a planet to maintain and preserve.
You've had some significant challenges in the past 2 years. You can't mothball a pearl farm.
Absolutely not. Even though we see a huge decrease in sales and sales opportunities, being able to even export became very difficult, and then all of our clients that we do sell to were closed. However, a pearl farm simply can't turn off the engine. We cannot do that. We're farming a living animal, and as farmers, we have to look after them, and that means we have to go out there daily, make sure that their health is fine, not just for the next 6 months, but when we're doing the jobs we did over the last couple of years, made sure that we're going to have pearls tomorrow and for 5 years out. That's how long we are, and we're vested in the long-term goal of pearling and the industry. So it has been really difficult, but that's part of what we have to do, and we embrace as farmers.
And thinking about the long term, if I turn to South Africa, that economy has really been built by precious metals and diamonds. So as a representative of the platinum miners, the PGI is funded by the main South African platinum miners. Hugh, what do you see are the main ESG initiatives that your members are now embracing?
Well, over 70% of the world's mined platinum production comes from South Africa. And when you're down in South Africa, as part of the mining community in South Africa, platinum is by far the biggest sector in terms of its contribution to GDP. And in terms of employment, the sector employs about 160,000 individuals. And then you can add a multiplier of 10 onto that to understand the impact that has on communities. So it's a very important sector. The 5 main producers in South Africa, sponsors of the Platinum Guild International, which is my organization. And they obviously, publicly owned companies. There's a high degree of scrutiny on all of their activities. So when we kind of look at the sector in general, all those companies signed on to the UN Global Pact and actually acting on the SDGs. All the mined platinum that comes onto the global market adheres to the standards of the London Platinum Palladium market, good delivery standards in terms of responsibly sourced. So it's certified as responsibly sourced. And then in terms of the companies themselves, they're very proactive in this area. Anglo-American, which is the biggest operator down there, the parent company of Anglo Platinum, have committed to be net carbon zero by 2040 and 30% by 2030. So that's a huge commitment because these mining operations obviously are very energy intensive. They use a lot of water, they use a lot of power, electricity in a country that doesn't really have much of those kind of resources. So it's a big area, and the way these companies are achieving those kind of ambitious goals is by basically having to convert to carbon neutral fuels, so using solar, hydrogen. Of course, hydrogen uses platinum, and the mining companies are being very aggressive and progressive in developing the technologies that will bring hydrogen electric as an option to battery electric. So on the environmental front, that's obviously important. And then from a social impact, these companies touch millions of lives. And so there's a lot that they've been doing. If we just take, for example, the most recent massive issue that we've had in South Africa, which is the COVID pandemic, the mining companies basically were the biggest distributors of vaccines. Something like 90% of their employees now are vaccinated, fully vaccinated. And what astonishes me is that production was not actually disrupted throughout the entire pandemic, even though that's a very, when you get down in these mines, you can imagine going down these mine shafts, there's a lot of people compressed into small areas, but they managed to actually keep the mine operations running at a time when the government scrutiny on them was, any outbreaks, we shut you down. So I think they did an incredible job on that. But it goes further than that. I mean, that echoes to a certain extent the efforts they did during the AIDS epidemic many, many years ago, where basically these mining companies were the biggest distributors of retroviral drugs in the country. So they've always kind of taken the lead in that. And then the efforts go beyond that in terms of looking at how they support and impact the local communities. And making sure that there is a sustainable economy in place for when these mines eventually will be shuttered. because they're not going to be here in 100 years' time. So what are all those people going to be doing? So a lot of the projects that they invest in are actually developing sustainable economies that will be able to function when the mines are no longer there.
It's a really good point to bring in, and Charlie, I see you nodding your head. You know, as somebody that represents a family that's traded gold for 260 years, as we talked about, and you know, your new venture from BETS, SMO, Single Mine Origin Gold, from Yanfolila Mine in Mali in West Africa. But from my perspective, where I sit, when I watch many retailers now, I see an increasing trend to put a sustainable angle on only using recycled gold. Is that the best sustainable option?
It's certainly a sustainable option. You know, as you say, we've been recycling gold for a quarter of a millennium, so you're not going to find me knocking recycling. I think it's incredibly important. I think it's a really, really important piece of the jigsaw, but it's definitely only a piece of the jigsaw. I mean, recycled metal probably accounts for about 25% of global gold supply, and I would argue it's quite easy for jewelry brands to slightly sidestep the issues of sustainability and engaging with the issues within mining and gold production by just saying we're going to wash our hands of that and just use recycled metal. With recycled metal, there is no, you know, there's no real structure of regulation around it. It's quite easy to claim metal is recycled. Gold is sort of infinitely recycled. And you don't know the provenance of that metal. And you can't really make any claim about the positive impact recycled metal is having on a host community. So if we turn our gaze to the other 75% of the gold, actually, if you engage with that properly, and the reason I was nodding to Hugh's point is actually big corporate mining companies done right, actually some of them are incredibly progressive corporate citizens, and the impact they're having in some of the most challenging areas of the world is phenomenal. So you know, Boodles, for example, was a big early adopter of our single mine origin gold, and the reason they were so keen on this product is because rather than ducking the issue and saying all our gold's now recycled, they wanted to engage with some of the issues in really challenging areas in West Africa and be able to demonstrate that they've had a genuine positive impact affecting thousands of lives.
So tell me specifically about what are some of those positive impacts that you can see that Hummingbird and SMO are creating in Mali? Yeah, so I mean, so single mine origin isn't just Hummingbird Resources. It's open to any mine that is signed up to and has a third-party audit with a responsibility standard. So we also have Endeavour's Ity mine in the Ivory Coast. But if I talk about Yanfolila in Mali, you know, the transformation on that local community is phenomenal. You know, there are alternative livelihoods, you know, setting up poultry farms. They're employing 900 people in market gardens, soap making projects, beekeeping projects. And I think, you know, the bit that I think is most important is the health and education infrastructure that's brought to that area. So just to quickly dig into that, Hummingbird works with a company called Critical Care International, and they not only provide healthcare service to the mine and the mine staff, but they have community outreach programs. Now, very sadly, the area in southern Mali around Yanfolila has unacceptably high child mortality, 20%. 1 in 5 children is dying before the age of 5 in that area. The impact that, you know, if you take the expertise and skills from the most advanced medical, you know, systems in the world, by applying that into a community like that, the amplification is extraordinary. You know, in 2020, CCI went out into the community and assessed 1,100 children for malnutrition. They found 159 cases of severe acute malnutrition, which has a mortality of 50%. And they treated that and cured that. That is a tangible benefit that we can trace right through the supply chain and a consumer can feel fantastic about. I like that story, and of course what we're talking about here is real tangible benefits. And I want to segue in, we've still got 15 minutes to go, but I want to segue in to really talk about how you guys demonstrate your commitment to these principles you've been talking about so far. And Hayley, you know, I'm very pleased to make sure that everybody is well aware that Greenland Ruby is the first colored stone mining company certified to RJC's Code of Practices, the Responsible Jewellery Councils. Now, what a fantastic achievement for the business and yourself and all of your team that went through that. Why was it important for you to do that?
Well, thank you, Ed. And indeed, it is an incredible achievement for a colored gemstone mining operation to have gained the certification against the RJC Code of Practices. If you don't know what that is, if anybody by any chance doesn't know what that is, I do suggest that you look into it. The RJC is a organization within our industry that is setting standards to which we can look towards in creating better businesses for ourselves and for our industry. And the colored gemstone industry has actually lagged a little bit behind the RJC because, as I said, or I touched upon a little bit earlier, colored gemstones are really, really a difficult segment within our industry to actually pigeonhole into the RJC Code of Practices. But it was just a couple of years ago where their Code of Practices accommodated colored gemstone mining. And Greenland Ruby, the first company to get certified against these Code of Practices, worked really hard over the last 2 to 3 years to achieve the certification. And when I say we worked really hard, it was indeed hard, but I will also say that these standards are within the DNA of our company. We are a newly formed organization. We operate out of Greenland and everything we do is held to the highest of Northern European standards. So from that point of view, from environmental, from health and safety, human resources, complying with the RJC Code of Practices was something that actually, you know, we did through a series of auditing processes and was achieved over time. And of course, not an easy process, but indeed something that we could accommodate within our organization. I will say, though, that we have a gentleman in our audience, Torben Fries is our compliance officer. I would recommend that if one does go on this journey with RJC, that you allocate a person within your organization that takes that responsibility, because it is a serious achievement. It is something that needs to be taken responsibly, and it is through Torben and his hard work that pulled us all together to help us achieve our certification.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Torben, maybe you'd like to stand so that everybody in the room knows. If you've got questions, please feel free to ask Torben.
Indeed.
I like the way you talk about it, and lots of people, of course, have looked at RJC, and I think you're recommending people to at least look at it, at least. But many companies are not in the same situation that Greenland Ruby are in.
No.
And many companies, especially smaller ones, in the colored gemstone supply chain have concerns.
Yeah,
so what would be your message to them?
And there are concerns, of course, because, achieving something like this, as I said, is no easy feat. It does, it costs, human resources, and, some people say, oh, well, it's so expensive to comply against these codes of practices. And perhaps it is, but perhaps one should also think about the cost involved with not being responsible. And look at a much bigger picture and a future picture. And what I've always said over these last number of years that I've worked in this sort of area within our industry, it's not just for the big companies or organizations, but that one should really take on these standards as individuals first and foremost. It starts with ourselves, with our own level of responsibility, with the individual, within our homes, and then within our offices, and then within our organization. And it sort of trickles down from there. So it's not what does it cost to be responsible, but what does it cost to not be responsible.
Yeah.
And I think that taking a look at the bigger picture is really where we all need to go within our industry.
And again, Chris, you're nodding there, so I think it's a good time to bring you back in. And we've talked about the diamond's journey, which has been longer than other materials, and Dimexon, you've outlined the work that you've done in gender empowerment, women's empowerment, also the work that you've been doing on conservation, wildlife conservation, and also support for local communities. But there are still questions asked sometimes from the consumer of the diamond industry. It has a legacy. So if I can, ask a pointed question, is the objective of the work that you've been doing, laudable though it is it to serve your social and environmental goals, or is it simply to serve your marketing efforts?
Spiky question, Ed.
Thank you.
No, it's absolutely not to service our marketing goals. I've talked about women empowerment. That's in Dimexon's DNA. It wasn't a hot topic 30 years ago, but it was a direction we decided to go in, and it's a direction we've maintained throughout. 30 years ago, we started recycling. We started funding and supporting educational institutes in the Coimbatore area as a way of giving back to the community. We started harvesting rainwater, treating sewage. These were all, sustainable actions, but sustainability wasn't the buzzword then that it is today. So I like to say that we were already doing this. Did we talk about it then? No, not really. But are we talking about it now? Yes. But times have changed, and people want to know more, and they can know more. And as I said earlier, it's all in the spirit of transparency. And, we work with some pretty major brands globally. And, like it or not, we are part of their supply chain. And, we've got to do the right thing in order for them to do the right thing. And, I won't repeat what I said earlier, but I mean, it's very much... And this is not something that we have done and therefore can sit on our laurels. This is a period of continuous work. I mean, we look at it as a process of continuous improvement. The challenge now is climate and environment in a way that it wasn't 20 or 30 years ago, and we've got to deal with that now. We've got to look at carbon emissions. We've got to look at all these other things, and it's not easy, but small strides. We all have to start with small steps, and eventually they'll become larger strides. And
it's important to recognize that as well. The diamond industry really had to change because of human rights issues and risks. But now the major risk we're facing is the climate crisis, and environmental issues are being brought to the fore. Can I turn to Pearls if we're talking about environmental issues? Because that you've been so passionate about this for many years. But from your perspective, when you're telling the Pearl sustainability story, which is inextricably linked to environmental issues, a clean environment produces a better quality pearl, and the opposite exists. How are we going to bring more people into the luxury jewelry industry with pearls?
Understanding that, the economic, we've got to realize that pearls have a unique role in the fact that we can provide economic opportunities based on marine conservation. The conscientious consumer, I believe, is looking for something quite unique and quite special. And while we are part of luxury, and that's where our economies come in, our economic opportunities, we are inherently based on marine conservation. And so we have to find a way to merge with NGOs or governments, regional bodies that are involved, oceans, UN oceans, to recognize the roles that pearl farming as an industry can play in marine conservation. Because if you take a look at the amount of consumers out there that are not yet part of luxury, a great intro and a great way to bring them in is by the story of pearls in conservation, and how these pearls provide these quasi-MPAs and jobs in some of the most highest levels of biodiversity and most threatened areas in the world that is critical for the future of our planet. And And that's how we grow our industry. We're not interested in taking anything away from any of the stones here. We believe 100% that pearls can bring in new consumers that have not even been aware of luxury, and that ethical or conscientious consumer. And it's the same people that we reach to during, that would come for a holiday to a place like Fiji. They're coming there because of the natural environment. Yeah. And pearls are there protecting that environment. And that's a message we've got to get out there. But it has been difficult. As you know, we've made multiple attempts with CIBJO on how we do this, because we do have to merge, and it's something that, if I can jump in, the RJC is not a mechanism for that. We need, that is part of, once we've got a Pearl Forum, then we become part of the RJC. Before that, we need to be part of conservation and conservation of marine areas. So it's a tricky situation we're in, but it's a great situation because of the potential that we can, and awareness that we create also by doing this. Because if we can go and stand up in front of the UN or Oceans or any conservation group, we're talking to a whole new audience. Yeah. And we're saying what luxury can do and how it contributes to conservation.
It's a great story for the future, and let's stick with that. But Charlie, can I turn to you? You know, thinking about your role with gold, and you know, jewelry brands, everybody's using gold, right? So how do you turn a sustainability story into a profitable story?
I think, you know, basically talk about what you're doing. Fundamentally, you know, consumers, as we've already said, are more and more engaged with provenance and sustainability. So with single mine origin, one of the things we're doing is we're providing QR codes so that the jeweler and the end consumer has a direct link to the source of that metal. So not only can, you know, you buy an engagement ring, you can see exactly where it came from, and you can look at the social and environmental impacts of that source. And for me, it's a virtuous circle. You know, the economy is moving in the direction where doing the right thing is also now doing the most profitable thing. Offering those, you know, direct traceability to a source, offering, you know, more responsibly sourced gemstones or pearls or whatever it is going to drive profit, because it's exactly what consumers want brands to do.
It allows me to bring in the favorite saying, do well by doing good.
Exactly.
Hugh, you know, I want to turn to you for some of the last questions, and you know, I'd like to ask the audience, if you do have any questions, we will have somebody with a microphone coming around, and we might have a couple of minutes at the end. But for Platinum, where do you see and where do you recommend the brands that you're working with to use sustainability and to increase their profitability, especially at the retail counter?
Well, I would say that my advice to any company as they enter this space is to go for the lowest hanging fruit. Now, I don't mean that from a cynical point of view of what is the easiest thing to do, but from the practical point of view is that you've got lots of goals, right? And you're never going to achieve 10 out of 10 on every goal. So I think every company, every sector can identify the areas where for them it makes the most sense for them to be starting. So if I look at the platinum sector in South Africa, for many, many years they've had very advanced and progressive social programs, because they impact a lot of communities that are living on the land where they're mining. So there has to be an accommodation and a mutually beneficial area. So I would say that, you know, in the platinum sector, we're very, very advanced in that. The environmental thing, as that's become more of a priority in the last 20 years, has been catching up. Yeah. But there are, I would say, you know, so it's really about looking where can you have the maximum impact in the short term, go for that, and then pick off those other targets as you go.
Great advice, thank you. Listen, we we've been living online for so long, and it's just so great to have an audience in front of us. So I can't miss this opportunity to throw out some questions to you. There is somebody with a microphone, okay? So please, if you have a question, raise your hand. If you can identify who you are, where you're from, and if it's to a specific panelist, please identify them by name.
Hi. My name is Elle Hill. I'm from Hill & Company, Business Management Consultants, and the question is for John. I love to hear about everything that you've been doing for a quarter of a millennium. That was a lovely quotation there. The QR code that you mentioned, technology is a trend, and sustainability is an enduring, exciting new thing that everyone's talking about. And the way that they can underpin each other is very exciting to me. So when you mentioned the QR code, I immediately thought, are you also now exploring how you might perhaps use NFTs to trace and track and allow people who are very excited to have those as a component of their purchase of ethical gold or traceable or single origin gold?
Non-fungible tokens, for those who don't know what an NFT is. Thank you, El.
Right. So to answer your question, at the moment, we're not using NFTs. So the chain of custody for the gold from the two mines we are using, it's quite a straightforward. And I think our primary goal is to keep adding massive extra cost out of the supply chain, because I also do a lot of work with Fair Trade and Fair Mind in the UK, and one of the things we constantly bang up against is the premium on those products for really, really good reasons. The premium is very significant, and it puts, some jewelers won't absorb it and won't engage with it. So we've tried to bring a product that is, available to the mass market at basically no premium. So we're trying to keep costs in the supply chain to a minimum. And also, I don't necessarily see that blockchain adds an enormous amount of value into the supply chain at the moment, because we have a very, very clear audit trail from mine to internationally recognized carriers, LBMA refiners, with Bureau Veritas coming in and auditing that segregation process. I don't think there's a great deal of scope for fraud within that supply chain. Having said that, I think these things, like everything, get cheaper. So at the moment, Hummingbird is part of the World Gold Council's trial with Agzedras, looking at introducing blockchain into that supply chain. So I think it will come, but it wasn't our driving priority at the start.
I don't want to put the rest of you on the spot, but I'm going to. Anybody else doing anything with NFTs?
If I could jump in. For us, there's definitely an avenue here for the pearl industry. And really briefly, the way we've looked at it, and that we've often described sustainable oceanic pearls, is the consumer should not feel like they're just buying a beautiful piece of jewelry, but they should feel like they're investing in our oceans and the health of the planet. Yeah. And that's so true for us that we do have to move that needle. We do have to look at NFTs, because we're not simply dealing with a piece of jewelry. We can tap into that conservation aspect of it, where the potential for pearls, in my view, is huge, and it's quite exciting, and I see that's going to be important in our future for sure.
We hear the excitement in your voice. Thanks, Justin. I think we did have another question here with the lady with the microphone.
Yes, hello, this is Marianne. I work within marketing and communications in Paris, and I'm also half Danish. So I'm interested in sustainability, knowing how Northern Europe tends to be very focused on that area. And I have a question for all of you. How far along is the French luxury industry with the topics of sustainability? What is your experience? And how can we make it even more relevant?
Did we all hear the question clearly? How far along is the French?
What is the level of interest from any French customers that you might have in sustainability? And is it something you're looking into, given that France is one of the bigger luxury markets?
Well,
It's put to everybody, but feel free to join in if you'd like, anybody.
I'll jump in quickly and just say that actually Greenland Ruby has an office in Paris. One of our main focus and target audience is the French luxury brands. Exactly for this reason, they are very interested in sustainability and responsibility. They are obviously, well, we all know that the high jewelry brands that originate in Europe or in France, and of course in Italy as well, are very sophisticated, and sustainability and responsibility does come hand in hand with this level of sophistication. It's key for us. And yes, we have an office that operates out of Paris to deal specifically with European brands as such, and we not our entire message, but a big part of our message is about sustainability, responsibility. Very important.
If I could jump in, we're selling more and more pearls into Europe, more and more into the developed and most influential markets, Europe and also the US. And it is specifically because of sustainability and that association. And, you know, some of the big brands that quite often have avoided pearls because pearls are so unique. We can't manufacture the same pearl over and over and over again. Each one would be unique in a way. That is changing. You know, now they're starting to understand that you know, they can't just talk sustainability. They've actually got to provide a sustainable product. And in my mind, you know, they're starting to wake up to the pearls are the ultimate sustainable gem that there is. And we definitely work with some French companies already and continue to do so. Yeah. Thank you for the French.
Chris.
I can't speak for the French consumer, but we do work with a number of French luxury houses, and I think what they're doing is commendable, actually, because they're driving the sustainability within the diamond industry. You know, it started a few years back with the whole naturality, and then in 2017, 2018, it moved on to traceability, and now we're working very closely with them on all sorts of ESG projects, because, you know, as we say, we're all part of the supply chain. We might be part of your Scope 3 emissions, so it means that we have to do our bit, and we have to look at everything that we can do within our organization, and that helps you. So it's I think that they're doing a great job.
Unless there's anything else that anybody wants to add, I'm conscious of the time. I'm very grateful for yours, for giving it to us today. We could talk about this lots more, and I'm sure we will, but talk is one thing, actual work is another. So I'm going to let you guys get on with your work. Chris Bull from Dimexon, thank you so much for joining us. Justin Hunter from J. Hunter Fiji Pearls. Hayley Henning from Greenland Ruby. Charlie Betts from Betts Metal Group and SMO. And last but not least, Hugh Daniel from Platinum Guild International, PGI. Thank you for joining. Thank you to all of you. I'm being told and indicated there is one question. I'm worried about the time, but I know that you will be brief with your question.
I don't know if it's turned on. Okay. Yes, please. Hi, my name is Esther Lichtert. I run a jewelry blog called Bizida. I do also consultancy and coaching in jewelry. I'm so proud to listen to your stories, and I feel so proud of the industry doing all these steps. My biggest worry is how does it trickle down to the people on the sales floor in a normal jewelry store? Where I go to, I see people struggle with this story. They don't have any answer about the sustainability about pearls. You've told a lovely story that I would like to translate.
Thank you for that. You know, I think I can answer that. Ask them to watch this video, which will be uploaded to VicenzaOro's YouTube and CIBJO's channel, and there's a range of stories that we've had here. So, you know, forgive me if I jump in, but time is against us on this point. And I think we've all demonstrated a load of clear benefits that the jewellery industry brings to society. So if I can answer that question, watch the video and learn and engage in these conversations. And there's so much going on, but it's a really important question, Esther.
I think blockchain is going to be the future in regards to that, where a QR code would be able to take you in our place to the mine, in our specific industry, right to the farm, right to where it's being farmed. That's where we want to get to, and we were trying to get to several years ago, but you know, it got a bit
training
difficult.
and education and training of sales team. Online sales toolkits, very important. Digital ability that everybody can tap into everything that they need to know, their fingertips.
Thanks, guys. Listen, I'm sorry, we've got 5 minutes before the next one. Thank you all very much for being here. 5 minutes, and we're back and talking about innovation and technology in jewelry manufacturing.
Well done.
Thank
you.
Thank you for having us.